Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. And today we are continuing on our Industrial Revolution chug, our train, choo choo. Um, this lecture might seem like a lot of information, but in actuality, it's just 6 slides of writing as compared to last lecture, which was about 14. So a bit of a change, and I'm helping you out by not making you write as much, but there's still important information. So let's slide right into it. So the last lecture was from chapter 5, lesson 1. This is from chapter 6. So you don't need to make another title page, but you should put this title, Mass Society and Democracy, in your upper margin of your paper in your notebook. Chapter 6, Mass Society and Democracy, 1870-1914. So if you know anything about that, in other words, we're heading towards World War I. Slowly, but we're getting there. All right, so what we're looking at is the growth of industrial prosperity, money, wealth, power. Chapter 6, lesson 1. All right, that was your warm-up, page 216. Objectives: we're going to compare and contrast populations in Europe to understand economic growth and explain the appeal of socialism to some workers. That should be socialism, but you know, it is what it is. So we're continuing on with the green. Sorry, I know it's a lot. Oh man, this first slide, I tend to do a lot on the first, but you know, needs must, and it's a lot. So continuing on with the green, right? So like Thanksgiving dinner, we have second. So the first industrial revolution had given rise to textiles, roads, railroads, and iron. The use of fossil fuels such as coal and then petroleum and natural gas resulted in revolutionary changes in energy in both factories and homes. The second industrial revolution involves steel, chemicals, and electricity will lead the way into new industrial frontiers. 1855, Sir Henry Bessemer patented a new process for making high-quality steel efficiently and cheaply, known as the Bessemer process. Steel will soon replace iron and it was used in the building of lighter, smaller, and faster machines and engines. It was used in railways, ships, and weapons. And in 1860, Great Britain, France, Germany, and Belgium produced 125,000 tons of steel, and by 1913, the total was 32 million tons. Crazy. Lots. 125,000 to 32 million, that's a big jump. And then you add the tons onto it, that's a lot. Electricity was a valuable new form of energy. It was converted into other energy forms such as heat, light, and motion, and moved easily through wires. In the 1870s, the first practical generators of electrical current were developed in 1910. Hydroelectric power stations and coal-fired steam generating plants connected homes and factories to a common source of power. Electricity gave birth to a series of new inventions. Homes and cities began to have electric lights when Thomas Edison and Joseph Swan created the light bulb. A revolution in communications also began when Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in 1876, and Guglielmo, I don't know if I said that right, Guglielmo Marconi sent the first radio waves across the Atlantic Ocean in 1901. By the 1880s, streetcars and subways powered by electricity had appeared in major European cities. Electricity transformed the factory as well. Conveyor belts, cranes, and machines could all be powered by electricity and with electrical lights. Factories could remain open 24 hours a day, making all that money. The development of the internal combustion engine fired by oil and then gasoline provided a new source of power and transportation. This engine gave rise to ocean liners with oil-fired engines as well as airplanes and the automobile. In 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright made the first flight in a fixed-wing plane at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. In 1919, the first regular passenger air service was established for planes. So now we got planes, trains galore. Good golly, so many inventions on this one slide. Bessemer process, telephone, light bulb, radio, gas-powered engines, planes, sheesh, subways. My. So that's Henry Bessemer. I don't know what's up with these pixelated pictures on my laptop, but hey, it is what it is. So that's Thomas Edison. That's Mr. Swan. Looks like Mr. Nunn. There you got Alexander Graham Bell, my nickname. That's Marconi. And that's how you flew a plane back in the day, believe it or not. New patterns. So industrial production grew at a rapid pace in large part because of greatly increased sales of manufactured goods. Europeans could now afford to buy more of these consumer products for several reasons. Wages for workers increased after 1870. Prices for manufactured goods were lower because of an increase in supply and reduced transportation costs. It was cheap. Goods were now being produced more quickly with greater efficiency. There's our favorite word. One of the biggest reasons for more efficient production was the assembly line, a new manufacturing method pioneered by our guy, Henry Ford, 1913. The assembly line allowed for much more efficient mass production of goods. In the cities, the first department stores began to sell a new range of consumer goods. These goods, clocks, bicycles, electric lights, typewriters, were made possible by the steel and electrical industries. A consumer culture where manufacturers focused on creating and selling inexpensive, standardized goods to consumers was now formed. The assembly line and mass production led to the creation of a process called division of labor, where larger assembly tasks were divided into smaller processes in order to, guess what, improve efficiency. However, while the division of labor allowed workers to become more specialized, also meant that the tasks factory workers performed became increasingly repetitive, boring. Work schedules became regimented and standardized based on a shift system. Specialized teams of workers would end their day and would be replaced by another team of equally specialized workers. Factory workers could go home, but production would never cease. Yada, yada, yada. So here's an assembly line of Henry Ford building the Model T, because that's what he's famous for. But he's also famous for interchangeable parts, making different items be used for different inventions. First, Walgreens drugstore right there. Division of labor. Each worker has a specific task. All right, uneven. So not everyone enjoyed the benefits of the Second Industrial Revolution. By the way, we're talking about the Second Industrial Revolution. Hopefully you can keep up. By 1900, Europe was divided into two economic zones: Great Britain, Belgium, France, Netherlands, Germany, the western part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and northern Italy made up an industrialized core. These nations had a higher standard of living, adequate systems of transportation. Southern Italy, the rest of Austria-Hungary, Spain, Portugal, the Balkan territories, and Russia remained largely agricultural economies. These areas provided food and raw materials for industrial economies and had much lower standard of living than the rest of Europe. Corporations grew in number and in wealth during the Second Industrial Revolution. Corporations were not new by the time of the Industrial Revolution. However, the growth of their wealth during this time saw them rise to prominence never before seen. As they competed against one another for profits, these corporations continued to grow as they sponsored new innovations in consumer goods and refinements in systems of production. Many corporations that came into existence during the Second Industrial Revolution still exist to this day. So again, the pixelated pictures, I don't get it. But here you got all these different corporations. Pepsi, Subway. I mean, they're probably more uniform today because Coca-Cola? Where's Coca-Cola? Coca-Cola's not even on here. There's Kit Kat, KFC. Are these all Coca-Cola? Why isn't Coca-Cola on here? Coca-Cola owns a lot now. So I'm going on about Coca-Cola. So uneven. Workers make less than one person. Here's some political cartoon of a big business. All right, world economy. The Second Industrial Revolution, combined with the growth of transportation by steamship and railroad, fostered a true world economy. Industrial production changed the lives of those who worked in and out of factories. Raw materials from across the world became essential to the creation of European manufactured goods. By 1900, Europeans were receiving beef and wool from Argentina and Australia, coffee from Brazil, iron ore from Algeria, and sugar from Java. Wow, interconnection. Despite the increase in global trade, most of the world's people continue to depend on subsistence agriculture to meet their everyday needs, only growing enough food to feed themselves. European capital was invested abroad to develop railways, mines, electrical power plants, not pants, and banks. Of course, foreign countries also provided markets for Europe's manufactured goods, standards of living rose, but for the most part, wealth became increasingly concentrated in an investor class that resided largely in Europe and North America. With its capital, industries, and military might, Europe dominated the world economy by 1900. S word. Ooh, the S word. Cursed. By the time of the Second Industrial Revolution, the economic system of industrial capitalism had become the dominant economic system of the world. However, the transition to an industrialized society was hard on workers. The desire to improve their working and living conditions led many industrial workers to form socialist political parties and socialist trade unions. The theory on which they had based these creations were based on the ideas of one Karl Marx. One form of Marxist socialism would eventually be called communism. We're going to talk a lot about communism later in this class. In 1848, but why not start now? In 1848, the Communist Manifesto was published by two German authors, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels. They wrote about the appalling conditions in factories and blamed capitalism for their conditions. Marx believed that all world history was a history of class struggles. According to Marx, the oppressor and the oppressed have always stood in constant opposition to one another. One group, the oppressors, owned the means of production such as land, raw materials, and money. Kind of like what we talked about in the last lecture. The other group, the oppressed, owned nothing and were dependent on the owners of the means of production. Marx believed he saw a society that was more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps in two great classes directly facing each other, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie, or the middle class, were the oppressors. The proletariat, or the working class, were the oppressed. Marx predicted that this class struggle between the two groups would finally lead to a revolution, and the proletariat would violently overthrow the bourgeoisie to form a dictatorship to organize the means of production. However, because this victory would essentially abolish economic differences that created separate social classes, Marx believed that a final revolution would ultimately produce a classless society. The state itself, which had been the tool for the bourgeoisie, would wither away. Yeah, test question. Communist Manifesto authors are Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Karl Marx is, you could say, the founder, and not really the founder, but he's considered like the father of socialism. Karl Marx. Read his book, Epic Beard Man. That's Karl Marx. Know it, even though you don't need to know what his face looks like. That's his homeboy, Friedrich Engels. Here are the capitalist leaders throughout our world. You have Marx and Engels, then you have Vladimir Lenin and Stalin, who we're going to talk about soon, and Mao. Organize and take the big bag. The working class, here's your wages. Capitalist class, wealth created by labor. Party on, Garth. In time, the working class leaders formed socialist parties based on Marx's ideas. They read his book, they put it to practice. Most important was the German Social Democratic Party, the SPD, which emerged in the 1875 under the direction of its Marxist leaders. The SPD advocated revolution while organizing itself into a mass political party that competed for elections in Germany's parliament. When in parliament, SPD delegates worked to pass laws that would improve conditions for the working class. In spite of government efforts to destroy it in 1912, the SPD became the largest single party in Germany. Hooray! Socialist parties emerged in other European states across this time. In 1889, the leaders of the various socialist parties joined together and formed something called the Second International. This was an association of nationalist groups that would fight against capitalism worldwide. Marxist parties were divided over their goals. However, pure Marxists thought capitalism could be defeated only by violent revolution. Other Marxists, called revisionists, rejected the revolutionary approach. This ideology became known as social democracy. Social Democrats argued that workers could work within the capitalist system to gain necessary and economic and social reforms beneficial to the working class. Social Democrats continued to organize political parties and and worked with other parties to gain reforms. As workers received a vote, they could achieve their aims by working within democratic systems. All right, the U. Another force working for evolutionary rather than revolutionary socialism was the trade union or labor unions. The union for workers. Industrial workers became dissatisfied with the rigid time, discipline, and dangerous conditions associated within the work of a factory. To protest these conditions and fight for improvements, workers organized in a union and began to strike. In a strike, a union calls on its members to stop work in order to pressure employers to meet their demands for higher wages or improve factory safety. Gaining the right to vote or gaining the right to strike became an important part of the trade union and labor movements. At first, laws that were passed to make strikes illegal under any circumstance, capitalists, conservative politicians, and even some liberals saw strikes as a threat to society, law, and order. As a consequence, many early strikes were crushed. However, in Great Britain, unions won the right to strike in 1870, and by 1914, almost 4 million workers were in British trade unions. The rest of Europe and the US trade unions had varying degrees of success in helping workers achieve a better life. And usually, if you were associated with a union, people thought you were communist or a socialist just because you were in a union. Unions were looked down upon, so not good. Here we got some strikes. Not a penny off the workers' wages, not a penny tax on food. I forget what this is. Some strikes would actually lead into, actual skirmishes with police and the military. So people were willing to die for these wages. And bada bing, bada boom, we are done. Man, I know I talked super duper fast. Just because, I need to get it done so you can watch this video. Anyways, we finished. That was mainly about the second industrial revolution. I know we talked about the first industrial revolution, which was more about 1760s to 1800. Okay. And then this onslaught of new innovation and new technology, new tinkering, new changes, new development, new efficiency, and new wealth, massive amounts of wealth, would turn it into a second phase of an industrial revolution. And that's why we need to talk about it. So I know we were talking about the 1900s and we're like, wait, we haven't talked. Yeah, I'm sorry. We jump around in world history because some things that happen in one era happen again in another era. So that's why we do what we do. Anyways, your homework is page 219, 2 through 4. 219, 2 through 4, 2, 3, and 4. All right. I know six slides of writing, super easy. Hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.